Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Natural Super Kids podcast. We have a very special episode today to celebrate World Breastfeeding Week, which is the week that this podcast is coming out from the 1st to the 7th of August every year. And World Breastfeeding Week is all about celebrating breastfeeding, encouraging breastfeeding, and also improving the health of babies around the world through breastfeeding. And I was thinking about who to bring on to talk about breastfeeding for this episode, and I immediately thought of my friend Amberley Harris from Maternal Instincts, who is a Melbourne-based registered and endorsed midwife in private practice, specialising in breastfeeding support. Amberley has over 13 years' experience working as a midwife, both in public and private hospital settings, and is also a mum of two. And I have seen behind the scenes, just how dedicated to this cause Amberley is. She works one-on-one with clients. She's in the midst of producing and creating a breastfeeding documentary, and she has online programs to support mothers with breastfeeding. So in today's episode, we talk about some of the breastfeeding statistics here in Australia. These really surprised me. We talk about some of the biggest challenges that Amberley sees mothers facing when it comes to learning how to breastfeed. Amberley shares her tips on increasing the chances of successfully breastfeeding and, all sorts of other tips and really helpful advice. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Amberley. Here she is. Hello, Amberley. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me, Jess.
Oh, so nice to be chatting to you. This episode has been a long time coming, so we're excited to get you on and to pick your brains about breastfeeding. So can you start by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and where this passion for breastfeeding came from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a mum of two, and I'm a registered and endorsed midwife. So I've worked for 13 years in both public and private hospitals. And then I went into private practice 6 years ago now. And midwifery is just a really great job in that there's a lot of different areas you can specialise. And I knew pretty early on that I loved helping mothers after they'd had their baby. The babies are a real bonus, but I really love the mothers. I'm in this work for the mothers, the people having the families having their babies. Mm-hmm. So I really just discovered early on I loved specialising in that breastfeeding space, and probably it was compounded by my own personal experience with breastfeeding and the challenges I faced, and seeing the gaps in the system and wanting to really bridge those gaps and help new families with their babies.
Yes, love it. And so often, the work we do comes from, in some way from our own personal experience, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you start by letting us know what some of the key benefits of breastfeeding are?
For sure. So obviously these are like super broad categories, but really there's so many amazing benefits to breastfeeding. There's the nutritional benefits, the immune, the intellectual, the emotional and social, and there's also amazing maternal benefits to breastfeeding.
Yeah. So many. And I think most of the listeners for the Natural Super Kids podcast will be, on board of all of those benefits. But it's good to sort of, list them out. And we talk a lot about, immunity and gut health here at Natural Super Kids. So and, obviously that nutritional benefit as well. So can you unpack Australia's breastfeeding statistics for us?
Yes, of course. So, unfortunately, the statistics we're still referencing are quite old. The 2010 National Infant Feeding Survey are the results that we've got access to.
Oh.
They did do another study during the COVID-19 pandemic that the Australian Bureau of Statistics did. So we do have some more recent data, but it really echoes the results of that study back in 2010. So what we learned from that study was we have amazing initiation rates. We have a 96% initiation rate for Australian women, which is incredible. So I think it really tells us that Australian mothers are very motivated to breastfeed. And beyond that, our statistics start to drop. So at 3 months of age, 39% of Australian mothers are still exclusively breastfeeding. And at 5 months of age, 15% are still exclusively breastfeeding. So,
Wow.
yeah, our statistics really drop off. And what I think what I definitely learnt from that, where if you look more closely at the statistics, the majority of mothers abandon breastfeeding in the first 6 weeks. So that was sort of the biggest takeaway, is that we found that women need more help in the first 6 weeks, and that was a big motivation for something that I've created beyond learning that data, which is a 662 movement. So what that is I am super motivated to help mothers learn how to breastfeed over the first 6 weeks, because if we can make it through the first 6 weeks, we are likely to go on and successfully breastfeed. So that 6 is the first one in the 662, the first 6 weeks, in the hope that mothers can then go on and follow the World Health Organization guidelines, which is exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months and continue breastfeeding until their child turns 2 or beyond. So that is my 662 movement. And it's really just a framework to break breastfeeding down, to make it feel a bit more like we can have like a tangible goal to go, right, I really want to work towards my 6-week milestone. And then, hopefully you get through that and you think, okay, now I want to, go for a few more months, and I want to get to 6 months. And
Yes.
So, yeah, it's about breaking it down and making it feel, more achievable.
Yeah, definitely. And so that statistic, I can't remember what you called it, like the initiating breastfeeding statistic, was much higher than I thought it was. But then, that drop off is huge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Exactly. It really is. And there's so many reasons why it is so hard for mothers to breastfeed. But yeah, I don't think we realized how much those statistics drop off, especially, when I think, the initiation rates just tell us that, we're really, really committed to breastfeeding. But I think sometimes maybe the choice is taken away from women. A lot of mothers that are unable to breastfeed say, look, it wasn't what I wanted. I didn't choose this. In the end, it didn't work out for whatever reason. But yeah, I think, what is really encouraging is we are, as a nation, we're very motivated to breastfeed.
Yeah. It's just the challenges and issues along the way. And I really resonate with this with my first baby. He's now 15, so it was a few years ago now. But my milk just took so long to come in. So I think it was like 6 or 7 days for my milk to come in, which was a long time. And I'm just so grateful that I had such a supportive midwife that kept telling me, just keep feeding, keep feeding, keep feeding. He was really on the cusp of having lost too much weight. But then finally my milk did come in. But there were other professionals and, well-meaning family members saying, just give him some formula, just give him some formula. And then I've talked to other mothers since, that have had the same situation but did not continue their breastfeeding journey because their milk took so long to come in, and they started formula, because then obviously that stimulation of not feeding baby as much kind of doesn't, it affects the milk as well.
Absolutely. That's not an uncommon story, I think. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I'm like you said, there's so many different reasons why people stop breastfeeding, and this is where your work really shine. So when it comes to mothers learning how to breastfeed, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges?
I think conflicting advice is probably the biggest one that mothers will share with me if they've birthed in hospital. So many people tell them different things. I think that is a real problem that we have. There's generational barriers as well, like you sort of touched on about, family members, well-meaning, but will maybe the advice that, our mothers, like the grandmothers in this scenario, are trying to help, and their advice is very outdated. I think the sexualization of women's breasts does make it hard for a lot of mothers to feel comfortable breastfeeding in public. So they're more likely to say, well, I'm not going to go anywhere, or I'm not going to feed, in public. I'm going to, take a bottle, and all of that goes with it. There's other topics like, the need to return to the workforce. Some of us need to go back to work for financial reasons. And, maybe there's really poor paid parental leave, or maybe there isn't any at all. So that's a real problem. And then I'm in the middle of making a breastfeeding documentary. So probably what I've learnt the most is about cultural influences. There's places in the world where women are revered, they're celebrated, and the idea, it's a no-brainer to keep mothers and babies together. Probably best example of that, actually, just the other night, one of the girls in my membership was saying she's an Aussie mum, needs to go to a wedding, and her baby wasn't invited to the wedding. And so she was trying to figure out logistically how she was going to make it all work. And I just, that is an example, we in Australia, we don't revere mothers. I don't think we prioritise keeping mothers and babies together. That's a social occasion that this mum should have been there to see her friends get married. And yet in the end, she was like, I don't want to give donor milk or formula. Like I can't give a bottle. Logistically, it just totally overwhelmed her. So, that's just one example. I think there's so many reasons why it is so hard for women to breastfeed, and why even they might initiate breastfeeding and do well for a period of time. But I think duration is our Achilles heel. And it's all of those reasons that come into play.
Yeah, and when you mention all of those, like really the odds are stacked against us, aren't they? Like, depending on our social circles and our community, like I know, there are some that are, very positive in terms of that breastfeeding journey. But yeah, when you sort of talk through there, that wedding invitation, that's such a good example, of how hard it can be for women to continue to breastfeed and have that social life as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so true.
So how can women and pregnant people increase their chances of successfully breastfeeding? Because we need to think about this when we're pregnant, right? It's not just about, I mean, I know, and I can really relate to feeling like it's all about the birth. How do I want to birth, and not really thinking too much about breastfeeding, thinking that the breastfeeding will just come naturally because that's what you sort of see, but it's not that easy for a lot of women.
No, it's true. It's so true. Look, I think there's kind of two areas that we need to focus on in preparing for our breastfeeding journey. I think it's kind of encapsulated in education and support as sort of the two sort of main pillars. So yes, absolutely agree with you. We must do that education, earlier off in pregnancy. I think once we've birthed our baby and we're in the thick of it, it's not the right time to start trying to get our head around positioning and attachment and all of that. So yeah, I think that education side of it, finding someone that you connect with and you like their content, and trying to access, whether it's an online course or sometimes hospitals run classes as well. I find the hospital-based classes can be a bit limiting, so it can be good to maybe do a hospital-based class, but also do something that's an independent education from a midwife or an international board certified lactation consultant. So definitely education. And then moving on to support, that kind of sits in two categories. So I think there's professional support and there's personal support as well. So with that professional support, it's about finding someone you like their vibe and you connect with, and their whole ethos really resonates with you. that someone who works in private practice, you can have come to your house, or you can work with, even if it's geographically you can't access them in person, but you can work with them in a video format, and get really good support. So that, exactly the example that you gave about waiting for your milk to come in, having that person to say, okay, so my milk isn't in yet, but how do I know all is well? Well, my baby's weeing and pooing, and my baby's content, and the weight loss is within the normal range. And I can feel my breasts are getting firmer. So I just know that we just need to keep going. We just need to keep feeding lots and give it more time. So it's having that information, as opposed to, someone that is maybe not so motivated about protecting your breastfeeding relationship, and likely to come in and suggest other fluids for babies. So that's the professional support. And then just quickly touching on personal support. So it is about, recruiting help from your family, saying to your partner, I really want to breastfeed. So if I'm, exhausted and it's in the thick of the night, you saying, because we know that even though they have the best of intentions, we know partners are usually the ones that are likely to say, do you want to use a bottle? I can do that. And I love that. They want to help. But maybe saying that's not the help that I am needing in that moment. That's not protecting and preserving my breastfeeding relationship. So, say you're going to get up with me and do each feed. You're going to, do the burping. You're going to do the nappy change. You're going to make sure I'm well nourished and take care of, the food aspect, or walking the dog, or whatever else. But it really is about having our partner and even our parents have an understanding of breastfeeding, because young babies feed very frequently. And I think when mothers are told, oh, your baby's feeding again, it makes them question, do I have enough milk for my baby? Like, something as simple as that can plant a seed of doubt. So
that's
I think
so true. Those little comments, and usually they are well-meaning, but that's right. It can plant that seed of like, oh, am I doing this right? Are they getting enough milk? And I love that, like having that really clear intention and prioritizing that. And we all will hopefully, there's people around to support and help, but I love those examples of how you can kind of guide them to help in different ways, as opposed to bringing you a bottle, if, your intention and priority is to breastfeed. So such a good example. And just on that, the generational kind of thing as well, I think, generally, well, this was my experience, and I think it's very common, our parents breastfed for a lot shorter time than, is that World Health Organization of 2 years. I was thinking, I know my mum breastfed for 4 months. That was the kind of recommendation from the doctors back then. I think educating the grandparents or our parents on the newer kind of information is so important as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, yes. Exactly. Yeah. And again, they have the best of intentions, but I think having them do some research, in the same way you might say, can you do a first aid course? Like, we don't put butter on burns anymore, things like that. Like you refresh. I think it's the same kind of thing. If you're becoming a grandparent, can you do this refresher for me? Just so that, you can understand how, I really do want to feed our baby.
Yeah, such a good idea. And going back to that sort of 662 movement of yours, I remember, around with both of my babies around that 12-month mark, when I continued to breastfeed past 12 months, I remember getting lots of comments as well, like, oh, you're still breastfeeding, aren't they too big for breast milk now? Like, so that's really common as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's not really very socially acceptable to breastfeed beyond toddlerhood, or, there's lots of reasons why I feel like families will say they're not so comfortable with it if, the little one can ask for it, or if they've got teeth, or they're walking, like whatever the reason is. So I think it's just about coming back to the research and saying, well, human milk in toddlerhood, it's almost more powerful than in that first year of life. I mean, the first year of life, it's obviously essential, but once we've introduced solids, human milk takes on a different role, kind of a backseat role, because they obviously increase their appetite for solids. But toddlers are fussy. They don't eat the foods that we would love them to. So human milk has this amazing way of being, you know, a really great nutritional source. We don't need to be so concerned about what our little one eats. But then the other side of it that's really incredible is the immune protection that we get. We know from an immune perspective, there's almost more going on in that second year of life because our toddlers are mobile. They are moving a little bit further away from us. They come in contact through walking and touching different surfaces. So there's an increase in colds, gastro and ear infections in that second year of life. So our human milk has this amazing ability to obviously respond to those pathogens in our little ones and our environment and create specific antibodies. So our toddlers either don't get sick or they get a much milder version. So I think it's about reminding people that if they say, you know, that's, oh, wow, is, you know, your toddler really still needing milk? Or probably the one that I find the most interesting is, why don't you just give them cow's milk? You know, why would you keep breastfeeding? Aren't they ready, you know, for cow's milk? It's like, well, cow's milk is great for cows, you know, for baby cows. Great fit. But it's our human milk obviously is completely tailored for our little ones. And yeah, I think it's just a reminder of that. Well, actually, you know, if someone does approach you and make you feel uncomfortable, just saying, well, actually, there's great evidence to suggest that human milk, you know, continued until 2 or beyond, is playing an unrivaled role in my little one's immune system.
Yes, I love that. Just having a few little kind of just little bits of research or little sentences that you can kind of reply with. So I think that's really empowering. Yes, and the amount of sickness that we see in toddlers here at Natural Super Kids, and, you know, parents are looking for those supplements or certain foods that they can be feeding their children that will boost their immune system, when we've got this you know, natural source that is within our bodies that we can be completely free, that we can be giving to our babies for that immune booster. So that's such an important thing to be remembering.
Amazing. Exactly. Exactly. It's just, you're right. And I think looking at the difference in like hospital admissions and the amount of antibiotic use, and if you look at comparatively what milk source that child was fed and received, you know, that data is compelling enough for me to say, don't be rattled by someone questioning, should you still be feeding your baby in toddlerhood? You know, hold strong to why you're doing it. These are all the reasons why we want to keep our breastfeeding. And not to mention as well, when our little one is sick, it is so exhausting for everyone, your whole household.
Exactly.
And when you can feed your baby, and quite often I'll have mothers write to me, there's a couple of mums right now actually in my membership whose babies have got hand, foot and mouth, and they won't eat any food.
Yeah.
And they were saying, oh, but like she's still breastfeeding. And it's like, yes, like exactly. So that's awesome. So, and it just makes you feel so much better as a mother. Look, you're super miserable, you've got a temperature or whatever, but I know you're receiving my milk and that is making a huge difference.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes, exactly. That reassurance. Okay. And is there anything final that you would like to share in terms of breastfeeding tip with our audience?
Sure. I think the final tip, I think really good thing to remember is the breast crawl, something as simple as the breast crawl. So not everyone hears about the breast crawl, but what it is, it's a sequence that our babies do after birth. And the breast crawl, so we are mammals, and as mammals, we share other features with fellow mammals. Obviously, we have hair, fur. We are warm-blooded. We, you know, have a 4-chambered heart. We've got 3 bones in our middle ear, things like this. But mainly, we secrete milk from our mammary glands to feed our young. And what this allows in being mammals is that all mammals, our offspring, are hardwired to crawl to the breast after birth and self-attach. And this sequence it's been well documented, and all of our babies do the same thing. So if you can learn about the breast crawl, have an understanding, okay, when I give birth, this is what's going to happen. This is what it's going to look like. And it really helps you protect that space, because that first breastfeed following the breast crawl it's like our baby's genetic blueprint for breastfeeding. It's very impactful. And it doesn't mean that if we don't do it well, we can't, recover.
Doomed forever. No.
Exactly. It doesn't mean that at all. But it does mean that if we do it, and the cool thing is it's reproducible for the first few months after birth. So even if your first feed is a little bit wonky, there's a lot going on in the room, but you can reproduce the breast crawl by putting your baby on your skin and doing it. And it is a very impactful way to help our baby and us. We are learning at the same time. We're learning our baby. Breastfeeding is relational. So if you can really focus on that and protect the breast crawl, I honestly think a big part of our breastfeeding challenges is because hospitals are busy places. The breast crawl takes a good hour. That whole process is rushed. But if we can go back to just slowing down, recognizing I've just had my baby, I want to watch this breast crawl unfold organically. It's one of the most extraordinary things to ever witness. So, if we can do that, I honestly think we can really turn our breastfeeding statistics around. And I think a big part of it lies with the breast crawl.
Yes, I love that. And that involves, communicating to your birth support team, right? That is what you want to happen as soon as your baby is born, or within, like, what's the sort of time frame that's recommended?
So generally, it might take a good sort of half an hour, 40 minutes for your baby to kind of just become acclimatized to the world. And remember, your baby's regulating their own heart rate and blood pressure, breathing, blood sugar levels. There's lots going on under the surface we can't see. So it does take them a little bit before they're ready to start searching for the breast. Whether you're breastfeeding or chest feeding, that whole process happens. Our babies do search in that same fashion. And so it is a matter about protecting the time. Maybe you say to your partner, can you sort of document, like, just in your mind, when did our little one arrive? So that roughly it's going to take probably a good hour before your baby's going to be ready to have that feed and all of that. And look, some places are really good. I definitely find mothers who birth at home have no concerns with this. They don't even need to communicate it with their midwives. Then all hospitals are a bit different. And of course, there's some hospitals where this really isn't a time that's protected, but it is really important. And you're absolutely right. Communication is the way to go. Just to speak to your birth team and say, this is really important to me. I can never get this time back. And so while I recognize that my baby will need to be weighed, or if you're doing the baby injections, that needs to happen, it doesn't need to happen in the first couple of hours of life. Like that can wait. So that's how I want things to unfold, because at the end of the day, it is your baby. So
yes, I love that. And that's super empowering. And like you said, other things can wait. They don't need to be done right then and there. That really does need to be the priority, doesn't it? In those first hours of life. I love that. And when you talked about those statistics early on in our chat, just focusing on that and prioritizing that is going to increase that chance of a successful breastfeeding in that first 6 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Exactly. It all has this amazing follow-on effect. So I think it really helps set us up in the best possible way. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So thank you. I could continue talking to you about breastfeeding all day long. And I'm sure there'll be lots of our listeners that are wanting to, find out more about you and what you offer. So can you let us know a little bit about what you offer, your services? You've got services and products and online services as well. So let us know.
Yeah, of course. So I do work with mothers in person. I'm Melbourne based, so I have packages where I work with mothers for the first 6 weeks. But I also work with mothers all over Australia and globally as well, if they want to work together more in a video format. I have a membership, which is an online space for women to come together and learn about breastfeeding and really keep breastfeeding. A lot of the time, the mothers will join in those first few weeks where things are going well, but they know that they don't want things to derail their breastfeeding. They don't want to have an early end to breastfeeding. So those mothers obviously are all passionate about the 662 movement and a part of it. And then, yes, I've got video content as well. I've got a breastfeeding course. If you want to learn about something like the breast crawl, I've got all of that in my course. And then a nipple butter, which is an amazing product to help with the adjustment that the nipple and areola goes through during, those first few weeks of breastfeeding. But also it's a product that you can use for your whole household, really, on cuts and grazes. And I use it as lip balm all the time. But yeah, anything that you can, that you sort of need for that is amazing.
Yeah, so it's a good all-round product. You don't just have to use it on the nipples. And I laugh because I've seen some of your content on Instagram where you're putting it on your daughter's like graze.
Exactly. It's like a really good hack. It's not, so it doesn't discriminate. It works anywhere.
Yes, perfect. I love it. So we will make sure all of the links to your membership, your course, your nipple butter, and just quickly before we go, tell us a bit more about this documentary that you have been working so hard and for so long on. COVID kind of got in the way of it for a bit, didn't it?
It did, exactly. Yeah, but no, it's all coming together. Yeah, so I am working on a documentary to go through what are the biggest barriers that mothers face with breastfeeding around the world and how we can turn it around, basically. I really want to create a resource that we can watch, but I guess knowing the impact of the way of the world, I am very concerned about, my children's generation on how they will go breastfeeding or chest feeding and all of that. So it's really important, I think, that we can go through, what is it? How can we target the people that are making some of those big decisions as well? Whether it's the marketing of formula or speaking to the policymakers. There's so many, things that I think we as mothers and as pregnant people, we don't even see a lot of it. Like, we don't know all the things that go into play. But we are influenced by it, whether it's just the way we birth in the hospital setting and, the way the medical professional work or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I think it's about, I am really trying to step back and interview people in those places that are making those big decisions to say, how can we do better? Because it just doesn't make sense to me that, Big Pharma has all this money to make, pharmaceuticals or antibiotics for the infections. And it's like, wow, why don't we just invest in
the prevention? Yes,
exactly. I just think there's so much we could be doing to improve herd immunity, and it starts with breastfeeding. So it starts with human milk, and and not focusing so much on the growth of the dairy industry. I think it's so simple to me. I'm like, well, why isn't it? So yeah, that's what the documentary is about. Basically, I'm trying to talk about all the things that people not necessarily know about, but also that are kind of being, shushed, there's too much of that going on. I want to talk about those big topics so that we can make a difference for the future generations.
Wow, it sounds amazing. I can't wait to see it when it's all done. And just congratulations, because I know it's such a huge project. It's involved lots of travel and so much of your time. So it must be exciting that it's kind of all coming together, and more than happy to share about that once it's all done and released.
Thank you, Jess. Yes, thank you. I can't wait either.
Thanks so much for joining me today. And we'll have to get you back on some other time. But thank you, Amberley.
Thank you, Jess. No worries. Have a great day.
You too. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.